Hi everyone, it's Kable here, and it's time for a review of this Blue Nile album, Hats. Yeah, it looks like I'm still stuck in old music territory here, and I do hope to talk about newer music again at some point, but seeing as this album right here has really left a huge impact on me, I figured that it's worth talking about on here right now. Anyways, the Blue Nile were a sophistopop trio from the UK, and Hats is their 1989 sophomore studio album. It came out 5 years after their debut album, A Walk Across the Rooftop, and to say that the group is full of energy and ready to make this album right off the gate would be horribly incorrect. The three members, lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist Paul Buchanan, bassist Robert Bell, and keyboardist Paul Joseph Moore, were dealing with severe writer's block and stress from their label to follow up their debut. However, after some time, they were able to overcome those issues thanks to going back home and re energizing, and they were able to give us Hats in 1989. Wow, it's almost as if giving the artist time to breathe and not just expecting them to make music out of nothing is a good thing. What a novel concept, I know. Anyways, while this album did become the group's biggest album in the UK, it only made a minor blip in the US, if at all. It also hasn't really left a huge impact on music nerds compared to other 1989 albums or even other sophistopop groups like Sade or even Prefab Sprout. So you might be wondering, how did I come into contact with this album? Well, it's kind of a complicated story. You see, back in 2024, one of my friends really got into this album, largely thanks to another one of my friends who... I thought the album seemed interesting at first glance, but I never really bothered to check it out for some reason. Eventually, though, the hype reached a bubbling point. That first friend that I was talking about really had an epiphany with that album, claiming it to be a top 20 album of all time, and it was then where I decided that I needed to listen to it. So I put the album on, and to say that I was blown away by what I've heard would be an understatement. I pretty much loved it on first listen, and on repeat listens, it only grew on me more and more, and now I don't think I have any qualms of calling this a top 5 favorite album of all time for me. I think my overall perception of music wasn't necessarily flipped on its head by this album, but I do think Hats has given me an overall greater appreciation of music and its capabilities, and it also allowed me to view some of my other favorite albums in a different light. I never thought that I would really say that about any album, let alone something like Hats, but it has happened, and I'm honestly so thankful for it. But okay, what makes Hats so special exactly, you might be wondering? Well, on the surface, it seems like a pretty straightforward album. Only 7 tracks, clocking in at under 40 minutes. But I think once you start to dive deeper into what this album has to offer, you'll notice that it is an emotionally devastating album. I'll also stress right now that Hats is a nighttime album through and through. I don't doubt you'll find enjoyment from it if you choose to listen to it during the day, but to me, this album hits so much harder if you hear it while the sun is down and the night tries to consume everything around you with only the artificial lights giving you any escape from its all-encompassing presence. God, that sounds super pretentious, but I can't think of any other way of putting it really. In fact, Light in the Dark is kind of an overarching theme across the album. Sometimes it's glorious, like Headlights on the Parade. Sometimes it's very somber, like on From a Late Night Train. Actually, let me talk about those two songs first, because not only are they back-to-back on the album, but together they create a huge emotional swerve on the album. You go from the bright and wondrous Headlights on the Parade, which is just bursting to the seam with color, and then everything dies down on From a Late Night Train. It's quieter, the combination of piano and trumpets and synth give off this very sad emotion. It's honestly my favorite song off of the whole album. While I'm talking about the instrumentation, I think it's also worth shouting out the production, because good lord, this album may have been made in the 80s, but it sounds so gorgeous. And I would argue it doesn't sound super dated for the most part. I know when we think of 80s music, we tend to think of certain characteristics, like how loud and bombastic a lot of it sounds, but Hats doesn't really sound like that. Like I said, its excitement is more reserved on the whole, and it gives the album an overall moodier sound. The flow is also immaculate, I'd say. I already mentioned my favorite 2-track combo earlier, but I think the rest of the album's flow is just as strong. Opening track Over the Hillside is a calm look on nighttime life with very simple lyrics. Actually, that's another thing about this album that I love. Lyrically, Hats is not a super complex album, but I find that this approach of trying to say so much by saying so little is very well done here. I guess you could argue that the music itself is carrying much of the emotional weight, which is true to some degree, but this pairing of simple lyrics and gorgeous production really makes for an incredible combo. I'll also say that on the whole, Paul Buchanan's vocals are just absolutely stunning. Like, they are so good. Anyways, Over the Hillside, great opener. This is followed up with The Downtown Lights, which is a more upbeat song, and it features one of my favorite lyrics of the album, as well as my favorite vocal performance in the outro. The neons and the cigarettes, rented rooms or rented cars, the crowded streets, the empty bars, chimney tops and trumpets, the golden lights, the loving prayers, the colored shoes, the empty trains. I'm tired of crying on the stairs. It's such a simple depiction of what it means to be all alone in the city night, and it's just heart-achingly sad. This sadness is carried over onto the following Let's Go Out Tonight, which is a slower song compared to the previous song and the following Headlights on the Parade. And while it's not as gut-wrenching as something like From a Late Night Train, in my opinion, it does have this very mysterious vibe around it. I really enjoy it. If I had to pick a least favorite song off of this album, it would be the penultimate track, 7 a.m., but that's mostly because I have to have a least favorite by default. 7 a.m. is still very amazing, even if it is arguably the most dated track of the bunch. Probably. I've always interpreted 7 a.m. as like being in a dream, which, following the emotionally heavy From a Late Night Train, was a smart move if I do say so myself. Finally, the closing track, Saturday Night, offers a more optimistic view on nightlife, not just in terms of its lyrics, which are less despondent than past songs, but the song also sounds brighter than any other song on here, I feel. It's quite lovely and a phenomenal way to close out the album. And, yeah, that's basically Hats. Like I said towards the start of the review, I'm so happy that I managed to hear this in full. It is an absolutely beautiful album about lifetime during the night, and it really is an album that I think more people should listen to at some point. If you're staying up late at night watching this video, please stop watching me. It's not like there's much video left anyways. And go listen to Hats by the Blue Nile. It's an easy 10 out of 10 album for me, and I hope that I piqued your interest in it. I hope you have a good night or day or whatever time you're watching this, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.